G'day guys, Source20 here and welcome back to Oceania. If this cinematic looks a little bit familiar, yeah, I'm recycling it. It's from 2 episodes ago and I'm recycling it because I had anticipated doing this episode 2 weeks ago, but they just became their own thing and now we have this one. And the reason why we are reusing this cinematic is because it transitions beautifully into Photoshop, because this is where we're going to be doing the bulk of our planning. At least for the first little portion of this episode. So we're going to be doing two main things. Number one, I wanted to do lots of big planning, get a good idea of where I want the bulk of the main significant places within Dundee to sit. Cemetery I've already done, the hospital I've already done, but I'm really focusing on the big things. So university, golf courses, malls, ports, industrial zones, this sort of stuff, because I know I want them within the city and I don't want to get to a stage where I develop, just keep expanding and then go, oh no, I really wish I had included this over there and, have to go and demolish a whole bunch of stuff. And I think when it comes down to it, I think this is what I enjoy doing the most about playing City Skylines, is actually just planning and dreaming and thinking of all these, ideas of where they're going to fit and how it's all going to fit together. It's probably why I always go back to road layouts and stuff like that. More so than, I do quite a lot of detail, but I much prefer doing this sort of stuff, that real big picture sort of planning. So that's what we're doing, just using Photoshop to get that idea, and that way I can actually go back and look at Photoshop, look at this map and get an idea of where I want these things to go. And you might notice just down in the left hand corner, there is a big chunk of land that I've dedicated to farms, agriculture. Now, this is the other part of this episode, the other focus. So I did this really dumb thing when I first started building within Dundee, and I just flattened everything and removed all these farms that I created. I guess I created those farms so I could publish the map on the workshop. And I'd anticipated going back and rebuilding those farms probably a little bit earlier on than I am right now. But the thing that I really hated about, building in Dundee is that I actually just had this very large vacant green area that just had no atmosphere. There's nothing. So I couldn't really zooming out of the city and looking at it from afar is always a little bit disappointing, because it just got this very concentrated city that looks like it's a chunk of a city. It doesn't look like it's its own little town or whatever. It looks like it's a chunk of a city, and because we haven't expanded out a huge amount and there's no farms and there's no outer city stuff, there's not even really that many trees around this city. And I always hate that about the beginning parts of building. This is probably why I still enjoy working in Marble Mountain, is because there's so much of the land is now complete and it always feels like you're just chipping away this project. Whereas this at the moment has felt, I guess, fun when you get really close to the city, but then when you zoom out, it's always just a bit there's still just a whole bunch of area that I haven't done. And whether or not I come back to this farmland and redo it, which I do actually plan to do. I do plan to come back and add in a little bit more detail and, add in some actual agriculture and get some industry happening, because I do want to get a good farming industry out this way. But I think this is just so important to create that backdrop for your city, and has really changed my idea of building within City Skylines. And, when I start working on, when I work on a new city or a new project or whatever, I'm going to make sure that I try and keep the landscape very much intact, because that way you're just sort of expanding out in a more natural way rather than just flattening everything and then going, I'll just work on it in chunks. And the thing is, the rest of the map is totally detailed and complete, and that is sort of the whole reason behind building this map in the first place, is that it's going to feel pretty much complete to begin with. I think I mentioned that at the very beginning of this series. But then I flattened this whole area out, and it's kind of why did I do that? So at the end of this episode, you're going to see just a huge change. It's going to change everything, and I highly encourage you to do that. If you're working on a city at the moment and you're feeling a little bit discouraged and it's just feeling incomplete, and it doesn't feel like you're ever going to get anywhere with it, and you're feeling a little bit discouraged, I encourage you to go through and just add in just some work around the outer skirts. Do a bit of planning around, whether you don't have to use Photoshop, you can use paint. I don't know why I'm bothering using Photoshop. I could have just used paint or piece of paper, whatever, just get an idea of where you want things to go, big ideas, big city features. And then just the outer skirts of the city, I think just making that look a little bit more natural. And this has really just made me feel way more motivated. Not that I didn't feel motivated already. You guys already know that I'm already pretty motivated to work on this. But it's just absolutely enhanced the experience so much more. So I'm definitely going to make sure that I don't just flatten everything and make things, gonna make sure that the outer edges of the city are just as detailed as everything else. Now, what we have been up to is I've added in a little bit of terraforming around here. Didn't want it to be flat. This is definitely a hilly area. There's 2 big mountains and this valley, and I wanted to make sure that there was some sort of realistic stream or river in the middle, carving its way through this mountainside. And there's also a bit of runoff where you can see some of, where some of the water has trickled down through the valleys of these mountains, made its way to the river. And there's a lot of that within this series, which I really do love about it, is, the terraforming all kind of works together and you can see it in a bit more of a natural sense. Speaking of natural, this is the opposite of natural. This is totally destroying the natural environment, but this is our power station. We've got a coal power station now, which is generating the bulk of the electricity for Dundee. And I wanted to place this down. This took about 5 minutes just to put the smallest amount of detail into it, and this is kind of the whole idea behind this, is just place it down, and if I get back to it, fantastic. If I don't, it's still there and I know where it's going to be. But it would be fun to come back here and you can actually see where the train line comes past. It'd be good to get a bit of a coal network. Actually, we're going to come back here for sure. But yeah, there's the power station. Also dragged out the power lines, which if you have seen any of my episodes recently, a little bit obsessed with power lines. They're just so much fun to work with, just the trail that they leave. And I wanted to just show that. So I'm dragging that network out and you can see it's just like going through the countryside here, but we'll come back here. We'll get back here and do a little bit extra work. Now, something else that I did, which is kind of interesting, and I haven't done it before and I'm totally going to do it again. But in a previous episode, I was working on the road layout and I placed down a whole bunch of avenues and streets out in the just outer skirts of the city to sort of go, okay, this is where bigger roads are going to go eventually. And then I left these avenues there, left these main roads, and they just sort of looked a little bit strange in the whole scheme of things. So what I've decided to do is I turned them into dirt roads, because that just makes sense, that they would be dirt roads before they get built up and upgraded to main roads. So now I've just dragged them out as dirt roads and eventually we'll upgrade them into main roads. And I think that is such a better way of doing it, rather than, my original way of doing it is like plan out all the roads, and if there's an avenue out there, it'll eventually make sense when we get there. No, I want it to make sense the whole time. So that's what we're sort of doing a big chunk of in this episode, is building and planning stuff for the present, like what it is looking like at the moment. There are a couple of exceptions. So for instance, where I want the airport to go, that's already pretty terraformed to how I want the airport to go. But places like this, I don't anticipate getting out this way for a while now. Like we've got other things to work on, but I don't want it to look like it's eventually going to have something. I want it to be how it is, and then we get to how I want it to look. So that's sort of the bulk of what we're going to be doing, and I really think that this is a much better way for me to plan out my areas. Something else we're putting out this way, which is always sitting on the outer edges of a city, is the city tip, and I thought that this would be a good spot for it. I always leave these to the very end of my cities, purely because they are the outer edge of the city type of things. No, I want to stick it down now. I want to know where it is, and that's where it's going to be. And I dare say we'll come back and just change it at some stage, because that was about like a 10-minute job. It's not really exactly the most greatest of looking areas. But I was really enjoying working on these dirt roads, thinking about how they go out and stretch out realistically, and also trying to think about what their purpose is. Most of them are going to be sort of dividers for the farmlands that are going to sit out this way. Some of them are almost like the main roads that are going to be leading to actual destinations. So there is going to be a smaller, like the next town out of Dundee, like the first town out of Dundee, I should say. That's going to be a vineyard. It's going to be known as wine country, and that's going to be a road that's going to lead out that way. I'm also placing down a bunch of these houses just directly on these dirt roads. I guess in a realistic way, they would actually have much larger driveways and they would have more detail. But at this stage, I'm just plopping them on this dirt road. They're fine the way they are at the moment, but we'll be back, no doubt. There's a whole bunch of other things I want to do out this way. That winery, that's something I've always wanted to do in City Skylines. I'm still yet to do a winery or a vineyard, and I've got just the location for it, and I think when we do it, we'll come out this direction and start adding in a little bit extra stuff. I think if anything, I probably add too many trees out this way. I think it's really difficult within City Skylines to have a bit of a limit with how many trees you want to put down. I guess in a real life setting, trees are, there's actually more trees than you would actually kind of expect. I think you sort of forget about how many there are until you really look out for them, and then you notice that there are actually just tons. But then for some reason, when you do it within City Skylines, it doesn't seem as natural. It sort of seems it's like too bulky. It's got, I don't know, there's something about it. But I always feel as if, I start going on a bit of a tree frenzy and I go, yeah, this is great. This is exactly what we needed. And then I zoom out and give it a bit of a look and go, actually, that's too many trees for some reason. There's a fine line and I can never find it. That is one of the biggest struggles I have, is finding the fine line with just the perfect amount of trees and something that's just too little. And I think the problem is that it really, to get it perfect, you need to spend a bit of time actually thinking about where they go and how they sit realistically, and whether that one should be there and which one shouldn't be there, and the size of the trees. I'm really, when I place these down, I'm going at a pretty fast rate. But I do think it's those just subtle differences that make these areas really come alive, make them feel more natural. Changing the ground color is one of them. I've talked about this before. I've complained about it before, but something that I really struggle with is just the lack of different textures and colors you can get on the ground, to really make these farmlands, these agricultural areas, just very distinct and different. There's only a limited amount. I've got a pretty good range within my map theme, using map theme mixer within Oceania, but it's still not exactly how I want it to be. But I think one thing that really does work well is using the surface brush tool. One thing that I think is still one of the best mods ever. And I'm just doing some of the ruin texture in some of the valleys, and I think that's a great way to just show that there is a stream of water down there that's actually just too small to see from bird's eye. But now we are starting to work a little bit closer to the city of Dundee, and we're putting down one of a couple of malls that are going to sit within the city. This is a strip mall, I guess. These are typically built around new development, and I think this one is just the perfect fit for this area. There's a brand new housing development right there. There's going to be one on the other side too. So I figured this would probably be a great shopping destination for those people, for the people living there. I'm keeping it super duper simple. Like, I'm not doing a huge amount down here. If anything, I'm leaving a lot of the imperfections, purely because I do, and this might be the common theme with this episode, but I do plan to get back here and maybe just change just some things just to make it a little bit better. But I'm also somewhat just content knowing that this mall is here. The mall itself has a huge amount of detail. If you want to like download it, I just type in mall on the Steam Workshop and you're bound to find it. But it is just so great, so much detail on this thing, and it's so realistic, and it just fits within this setting. Some of them are just a little bit too large. There's some other ones that I am subscribed to and I'm planning to use them, but they're actually probably a little bit just too large. But as you can see, pretty simple detail, just some other fast food joints on the outer edge of it, and that's about it. A fun little fact about Australia, I placed down a Hungry Jack's, which is I guess everybody else around the world would know it as Burger King, but we don't have any Burger Kings in Australia. We only have Hungry Jack's. I think there must be another place called Burger King, or I don't know. I don't really know why. But yeah, we got a Burger King. I don't know if it's the same in any other countries, but I just think that's kind of interesting. And I'm kind of happy that there's a Hungry Jack's on the workshop. So here I am. I've gone back and reduced a bunch of trees because I was just going a little bit tree crazy. Probably still need to go back and change some, but for the time being, it's fine the way it is. And look, these farms are just super duper simple. Like, there's nothing really going on down here. I'm dragging a couple of paths just to show a bit of boundary and some trees in lines, and that is pretty much about it. And that makes for somewhat of a convincing farm, as much as I want to put effort into, I guess. But as you can see, I am also just changing some of these roads to dirt roads. I think it just makes it look a little bit more natural. It just makes it look as if the city is growing and they're just some roads that are eventually going to go in that direction. But who knows? We'll see how we go, but I'm pretty sure that's where they're going to go. Last portion of this episode, and this is actually going to lead into next week's episode, which I have already finished recording. And you know what, just a quick plug, if you want to watch it early, it's already on Patreon for $1 a month if you're interested in seeing that early. But this is going to be a pretty fun episode because we're going to be putting in a harbor area where I wanted to build some like a bit of a commercial and touristic district, but also this is where the port of Dundee is going to sit. So it's going to be a really nice contrast between really nice touristic area, but then this other area that is just pure industry. And we're going to have a bridge going over here and a crazy interchange, and it's just going to be super fun. And the reason why I've decided to do that rather than keeping the suburb that was down here before is the suburb that was going to be down here wasn't really going to add anything extra to the map. Like, it wasn't going to be anything new. It felt like it was going to be pretty much the same old stuff, and it was me really overestimating how big I was going to go within this city. And now I've actually just got this pretty big chunk of land that I can do something a little bit more interesting and different with. So that's what we're going to be doing in that area. But just a little bit of terraforming just to make it fit in. We're going to come back down here and do some better planning in the next episode. But guys, that is just about it for today's episode. Thank you all so much for watching. The next couple of builds are going to be down in this area, and then I would like to really expand out a bit more of the suburbs, get a bit more of the city happening. There's just still a bit of a snippet of the city of what I really would like it to look like, and I'm just hanging on the edge of my seats to start really expanding out just a bit more, but that is for a future episode. Before I skedaddle, I want to give a special shout outs to the wonderful people supporting the channel via Patreon: Andrew May, Chris Jones, Yanis Cedric, Keith Hoffman, Laurel Ashton, Shay Stanton, Rachel Bergland, Samuel Breton, and Mr. New City. Guys, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!